I have a treat for you today. Today, I'm talking to Professor Bart Kay. Bart is a professor in cardiovascular and respiratory physiology, exercise physiology, nutrition, research methods, and statistics. Bart has published a number of peer-reviewed research and review articles, and we are very lucky to have Bart with us today. He's going to help us to understand the truth behind the old wives' tales about diet. Those old wives' tales that we get hit with all the time by family, friends, and new people that we meet as soon as we tell them we're doing carnivore or keto. He'll help us to understand that you're not going to get scurvy on the carnivore diet, and how 1,000 calories of Pop-Tarts is not the same as 1,000 calories of nutritious beef. What? Let's get into it with Bart. Bart, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel.
Not at all. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background and experience, please, as it relates to health and nutrition?
Yeah. I started my first undergraduate degree 25 years ago, something like that. And I first studied the physiology of rest and exercise, which was just been called sports science back then. And I went through that, and I came out the other end of that, and I started working in academia pretty much straight out of that. And then I did a number of years of teaching, researching, and such in that field. And then I decided I wanted to branch out from there. So I did some more study, and my next sort of specialty then was human nutrition after that. And then when I won't say got bored, when I wanted another challenge, is what I'll say. Then I went into cardiovascular pathophysiology, which is what causes diseases of the heart, the vascular system, your veins and arteries, etc., and what doesn't. And so before I knew it, 25 years was up, and I had done a quarter of a century of teaching, researching, consulting in those three fields. I also have kind of secondary qualifications in pure and applied statistics and all of that kind of stuff, which I picked up along the way. And then at the end of that, I decided that's enough of that, and I'm going to go and do something useful. So I decided to be a YouTube creator and influencer instead. And this has been much better so far, in some ways, and not in others. But that's for another day. So that's where I'm coming from. Really, I mean, my official, I guess, title is Professor of Health Science, but I have specialized in different areas throughout that period.
On your channel, which I'll link to below, and everyone should definitely go and check out and subscribe to, you seem very supportive of the carnivore, keto, low carb community. What about yourself? Would you classify yourself as a carnivore or a keto eater? What are you?
Yeah, I would. I'd call myself a carnivore. I would call myself typically around about 95% carnivore, just to give it an absolute explicit sort of so that people get the level of it. I go through periods where I challenge myself to go 100% carnivore, which requires me to drop out those last vestiges of things that are non-carnivore in nature. And I always actually am, even though it's not a surprise to me because it happens every time, I'm still always pleasantly not even surprised. Yeah, I don't even know what word to use, but I find that 100% carnivore is vastly better than 95%, more than 5% better. It's like half as good again, at least. And everyone else I've spoken to that's done 100% carnivore tends to agree. It turns out that plants do not actually want us to eat them. And given that they cannot run away from us, fly away, dive into a pond, hide behind a rock or something, they are rooted to the spot mostly. They have to have a defense mechanism against being eaten, and they have evolved a vast array of very, very effective toxins, most of which actually are immediately fatal for many of our insect friends. And that's how they've basically evolved, because it's insects are the ones that eat the most plant material, actually, vastly more than any other group of animals on the planet. And as such, that's the way they've evolved. Those toxins don't kill people and higher animals as effectively, as quickly as they do insects, but nonetheless, they do kill us over a lifetime of eating that sort of material. And you really don't get a view of how effective 100% carnivore is at improving your health until you've tried it for a significant period, like at least 90 days at a stretch, I would say.
Yeah, I'd like to try going that way one day. It's just very difficult to give up that last 5%.
Yeah, sure.
But that's probably why the results are so good, because that last 5% is really difficult to get rid of, like the coffee and the things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
So how long have you been eating this way?
I am now well into my 8th year of nominally carnivore diet, which is when I started to even think about it as a carnivore diet. I was probably eating carnivore by strict definition before that, by virtue of, if you look at the official, for want of a better term, the official definition of a carnivore, it's any animal that gets more than 70% of its intakes in the form of animal food, which I've been doing for quite some time. I
Mm.
actually went keto probably 26 or 7 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah. And throughout that time, I've been eating an amount of plant material. But then, as I say, 8 years ago, I went, right, now let's get rid of the vast majority of the rest of it. The things that I kept in are things like coffee, as you say, which I'm currently not doing because I'm on a challenge at the moment to do 100% carnivore for 90 days. And I've been known to eat the odd potato chip. I know, hand my card in, line up for public shaming. Currently not doing that, obviously. And actually, habitually, I'm not eating potato chips these days. I mean, it's pretty much a thing of the past. Beer, dirty beer. I've been known to drink a dirty beer or two. Not so much these days, of course. Pizza, the odd plate of blueberries. But no, 100% carnivore is the way to go, definitely. I mean, what a person actually does in their life really has no impact on what is actually demonstrably ideal for people. You can't negotiate with this thing. And it's not about what is realistic, because what's realistic is whatever you will discipline yourself personally to adhere to. And you can choose to be 100% disciplined if you want to. If you have addiction problems, like many people do, there are people you can talk to about that, including my lovely partner, Pim, who specializes in that exact field. Pim Johnson, Janson. You can get hold of her. Pim
I'll
at
include a link.
pimjohnson.com. Cool.
I'll include a link to her channel as well down below.
Awesome. There we go. Cha-ching. Got it in.
So you mentioned, like, previously, you've been known to eat potato chips and you've been known to eat, or drink beer or things like that. When I was doing keto previously, a few years ago, I found that you could kind of have those moments where you eat an ice cream or some potato chips or have a beer with friends or something. And as long as you limited it to that specific moment in time, whether it's that night out or whatever it happens to be, as long as you limited it to that and then you just went straight back to eating the normal way after that, then often you would actually get an improvement in your results as far as your weight or how you feel shortly after having that cheat. Is that
Yeah.
is that what you found?
Yes, absolutely. The longer you are 100% carnivore or 100% clean on your diet, though, the more your body actually reacts adversely to any transgression. People say to me, look, are there any negatives on a carnivore diet? And I kind of say to them, well, look, yes and no, because this might actually also be a blessing in disguise. And I think it probably is. But your tolerance for nonsense will drop. Your body will, once it gets clean, it will react strongly when you transgress. It will be like, Charlie Brown, we've discussed this. I told you last time that I didn't like it. You're not listening. I'm going to scream ever more louder, and you will pay every time and you'll pay more every time. It's quite amazing. But yes, it's about not doing that stuff chronically, typically every day, every week, whatever.
Really, I really appreciate your time coming on, because I was hoping that you could help us all with some things with your expert advice and knowledge of nutrition. We often get kind of probing questions from friends or family about the carnivore diet or about the keto diet. You know, channels like yours, we get an idea of how we can answer some of those questions, like, you know, about not getting enough nutrients and things like that. And so what I hoped is that maybe today you could help us with some kind of simpler or snappy explanations or answers to some of these more common questions.
No pressure. I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you. So one of the most common questions that I get from friends or comments on my channel is, how do you get enough vitamin C? Or what about vitamin C?
Yeah. Okay. People who eat a fully or close to fully carnivorous diet require vastly less vitamin C than people who eat the standard diet, which contains a significant amount of carbohydrate. Why is that so? It is so because the transporter that gets vitamin C out of your blood and into the cells where it's needed to do its thing, that transporter is a transporter known as GLUT4, which anyone that knows anything about physiology will have heard of. It's the one that transports sugar from the blood into the interior portion of the cells. So if you've got two substances competing for the same transporter, based on their concentration gradients, they will cross-inhibit each other from going in to some degree. Sugar is always going to win on a mixed diet with that, because you're going to have piles and piles and piles of sugar in your blood. It's one of the reasons you shouldn't do that, by the way, because sugar over and above your genetic normal baseline level is toxic, absolutely, and will cause you problems. One of those problems is it requires your level of vitamin C in your blood to be vastly higher so that it's got any chance of getting into your cells at all. Turns out that the level of vitamin C required on a carnivore diet for a human to avoid scurvy is in the nanograms per deciliter range, rather than the tens or even hundreds of milligrams that are suggested for a person on a standard diet. So that's the reason for it, basically. Now, are there nanograms of vitamin C to be found in muscle meat of large ruminant animals? Yes. Is it enough? Well, yes. How do I know? Well, because I've been eating that way for 8 years and I don't have scurvy. I also have a friend by the name of Rick Rodriguez, who lives in the States, who went carnivore in, get this, 1983 is when he went carnivore, and he hasn't had scurvy either, and hasn't eaten any carbohydrates or fruits or any of that kind of stuff in that time. So he's well overdue for scurvy. Hasn't happened. In terms of that, the other thing I can say to people is, look, if you're worried about scurvy, go to the medical literature published anywhere and see if you can find a single case of verified scurvy in a person eating a 100% muscle meat and associated fat diet, that being the muscle meat of large ruminant animals. You won't find it. Not one single case in the world, ever. We're done on vitamin C. There's enough.
Interesting. So basically, for someone doing a normal diet where they are loading up on sugar, that recommended daily intake of vitamin C, almost 100% of that is wasted in their body. Like, it's not doing anything because it can't get to the transporter.
Yep. Pretty much it gets to the transporter, but it can't get through because it can't shove the sugar out of the way. Think of vitamin C as a relatively slim person, and sugar is a relatively obese person trying to push through a revolving door at the same time. The big person is going to push the little person out of the way if it's a competition physically, and that's what it is. And so
that's a really good way of looking at it. So if you think of this as a crowded train in Japan, and everyone's trying to get on that crowded train at peak hour, and all the obese people are up the front, the sugar, and they're shoving the smaller people out the way, being the vitamin C. Interesting. Okay, that's a really cool way of looking at it.
Mm.
Thank you for that. Okay, so the next most common one is, what about fiber?
Mm. Indeed.
Aren't you blocked up?
Yeah. Well, as I say, in 8 years, no. One and done every morning, not even broken into stanzas. Is it stanzas or stanza? I don't know. With ease, no straining, no stress, no pressure, no difficulty of any kind. It actually turns out that there's one and only one existing study which is even anywhere close to an actual clinical study where people were followed up, people who presented with what was called idiopathic constipation. Now, idiopathic is medical speak for we don't know what the cause is. Now, a medic can never use the words I don't know, obviously, so they have to come up with a flash term. The term they have is idiopathic. So there's one for you. So people with idiopathic constipation presented and volunteered to be a part of this study. There was a group of 64 of them, and it was a multiple crossover study where what they did was, I think it was 4 different conditions that everybody went through in random order. So they took these people, they randomized who's going to get what first. And they said, right, we're going to have you change nothing, control situation. We're going to have you reduce your fiber by 50%. We're going to have you reduce your fiber to none at all. And we're going to have you increase your fiber by 50%. The hypothesis being that the high fiber group will have the best responses and the reduction in fiber will worsen this constipation. That was the hypothesis at the beginning, of course. As it turns out, the exact opposite was true in terms of the findings of the study. The people, well, when the people did the no fiber situation, irrespective of which order it was done in, those people got a complete remission of all their symptoms of constipation, pain, suffering, anal bleeding, all of it. It all went away on the no fiber situation. On the same fiber situation, nothing changed. On the 50% increase, it got worse, So that's the only study that looks at this even remotely clinically. It seems like it's like this was unequivocal because every single one of the people had complete remission on no fiber. And they had some remission in a dose response to reducing their fiber. Every one of those 64 people. I think we're done on that one.
Yeah.
Of course, people will say, oh, yes, but fiber is required because your enteric cells in your colon require a supply of short chain fatty acids in order to be healthy. To which is, I say, yes, they do. That's absolutely correct. And then I ask them, since you know so much about this, why don't you tell me what the name of that short chain fatty acid is? To which most of them will say, well, I don't know. In which case I'd say, well, why are you challenging me on this? But anyway, I'll help you out. I'll tell you. Here it is. It's a short chain fatty acid called butyrate. And they go, yeah. And I go, well, okay. When the enteric cells absorb butyrate as produced by some bacteria fermenting some indigestible fiber in your colon, what's the first thing that those cells do with that butyrate to make it actually metabolizable as an energy source? To which they usually say, I don't know that either. To which I say, well, let me help you with that. It undergoes a metabolic transmutation to another substance called beta-hydroxybutyrate. Are you with me now? Ever heard of that one before? No, they usually say, well, it's a ketone body. Okay, so the other thing you can do if you're not going to subserve the need for beta-hydroxybutyrate in the enteric cells from short-chain fatty acids by a small amount of fermentation of fiber in your guts, you can subserve that exact same substance from the blood side of those cells by having ketones in your blood. How do you do that? Well, you don't eat carbohydrates. Ketones.
Interesting.
So there is really no reason whatever to eat fiber, none at all.
So the cynic in me feels like, so the you need fiber thing is just a convenient thing to say for the food industry because they process plant-based foods.
Dead right. So they need to find any argument they possibly can to get you to eat things containing fiber because they're the people that paid for the science to tell you need fiber. 98% of all scientists agree with their source of funding. You'll find. I mean, the only other argument that people generally then say is, oh, yes, but if you don't eat fiber, then your gut bacteria will be the wrong kind. To which the answer is, well, nonsense. There is no wrong kind of gut flora. There's only a peaceable, balanced situation or otherwise. And there are many, many different forms of healthy gut microbiota, including balanced, happy, and peaceable arrangements of meat-loving bacteria in your colon, actually.
So, I mean,
about
it's just going to...
we know less about the gut microbiome than we do about the surface of Mars, in fact. So,
wow.
Sorry,
sorry, I just wanted to ask, so like regarding the microbiome, that's just going to adjust. Will that just adjust to whatever you're eating?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course.
So their argument is totally mute, right?
Yeah, it's just wrong. It's just not supportable with any science. It's ideology. It's spin doctrine, fearmongery. It's rubbish.
So, well, thank you for that. That makes things much clearer. The next one that I get quite often, and this one is the one that the people that say it seem to be the most kind of gnashing of teeth kind of people, right? And that's if you're not in a calorie deficit, there is no way you're going to lose fat. There's some problem with your body. You're sick, and you can't lose weight if you're not in a calorie deficit.
Yeah. Okay. So that comes from a position ultimately of complete ignorance of human biological systems, your hormonal system, your inflammasome, your metabolic processing of food. It even shows a vast misunderstanding of even what energy is, and it shows absolutely no comprehension of thermodynamics, because that's the thing they usually invoke as the support for their ridiculous argument, their ridiculous false argument around calories. It is a position with absolutely no actual leg to stand on scientifically from first principles. So let's deconstruct it from that basis forward. They'll say, well, the first principle is the first law of thermodynamics says that you must be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. To which my challenge to those people straight away is, fantastic. Could you quote the first law of thermodynamics for me, please? Could you do it, David? I don't want to put you on the spot. But
no, I couldn't. I would have no idea.
I wouldn't expect you to be able to, because the people who know what the first law of thermodynamics are, in fact, are the people who've studied the thing, probably at tertiary level, at a university level or beyond, actually. And so I've done this several times with so-called experts who've said to me, I'm absolutely wrong from first principles and I'm an idiot because the first law of thermodynamics. And I've said, great, why don't you tell me what that is? I've done it 3 times publicly, and 3 times the person who's calling me an idiot has got it wrong as to what the first law of thermodynamics even is. It might interest people to understand that the first law of thermodynamics is a case-limited version, a contextually specific version of the first law of thermodynamics. The case limitation, the specific context is in a closed thermodynamic system. Necessarily so by the very formulation, the very formalism, the very form of the first law of thermodynamics, which, by the way, I'll give to you so that you can write this down and use it in an argument, because you'll ask somebody what the first law of thermodynamics is, and they'll probably tell you that energy can't be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed in form. To which you respond, great, awesome. That's actually the law of conservation of energy, not the first law of thermodynamics at all. So good work. And it's wrong too, by the way, but that's for another day. Energy is not conserved any more than masses. And some people say mass is conserved. That definitely isn't true. Ask anyone that was alive in Hiroshima on the morning of the 6th of August, 1945, whether or not mass is conserved, and they will unequivocally state to you, it definitely is not. Okay? So that's fine on that one. Anyway, the first law of thermodynamics, in fact, says this. Delta U is equal to Q minus W, period. That's what it says. That's all it says. It says nothing else. There are no implications. It is a clear statement of the mathematical equivalence between heat energy and work energy in the situation of a closed thermodynamic system. Why do I say closed thermodynamic system specifically? Well, because let's go through those variables again. Delta U is the change in internal energy of the system at hand, and it is equal to Q, its specific heat capacity, minus W, any work done. Which one of those three variables describes mass? None of them. Ergo, we are talking about necessarily a closed thermodynamic system, a system that cannot exchange matter, mass, outside or inside of its boundary. It cannot import mass and it cannot export mass. It can only import or export energy. Ergo, the first law of thermodynamics does not apply to the human body. We are done. Now, those that want to understand a bit further the nuance beyond that, once you've dismissed this idiot that's telling you thermodynamics, because they clearly don't understand thermodynamics at all, right? You say, well, okay, now that we've dismissed your argument entirely from first principles, because that's the one you relied on, you said it was thermodynamics. No, it isn't. What you need to understand actually is that it's now well understood by those who are actually keeping up with the literature on this, that body composition and body mass are both mass balance exercises. Of course they are. At the end of the day, your weight, your mass, you can use those interchangeably in the situation of that mass being as it is in the influence of the gravitational field of the Earth, right? So same thing, fine. Your mass is just that. It's the weight of your body on a scale. So the only way to change your weight, upwards or downwards, is to gain or lose mass, not energy. What does energy weigh, David?
Nothing.
Right. So how can you change your weight? By changing your energy status.
That's a very good point.
No, it's an unassailable point. Here's the thing. What is energy in the form of a calorie? Because, well, let's go back a step from that. What is energy? Energy is a construct. It's an idea. It cannot be measured because it does not exist. It is not a physical thing. What we have to do to assert or gauge what energy has been at play is we have to measure the effect of that energy as we perceive it to be on physical mass stuff, i.e., how do we measure a calorie? A calorie is measured by the change in temperature of a water bath of a set volume surrounding a closed thermodynamic system, a bomb calorimeter, in which a sample of food is placed and immediately vaporized using a huge electrical current. That releases carbon dioxide, water, ash, and heat. That heat is in the form of photons. Photons propagate outwards from the point of combustion. They strike the walls of the bomb calorimeter and excite the metal in those walls.
Yeah.
A physical action, the excitement of those metal molecules. Then those metal molecules pass that excitement onto the water in that water bath. They get excited, heated. A calorie is the raising in temperature by 1 degree C of 1 milliliter of water. So again, question, just before we carry on. What is the rest mass of a photon, David?
Nothing.
Exactly. It does not interact with the Higgs field. It has no mass and no spatial extent of any kind. It cannot affect your mass nor your body composition. We're done, I think. You have to exchange matter.
That also,
Sure.
my simplest understanding of this, that bomb calorimeter, that experiment that's going to measure a calorie, that might measure calories, but that doesn't tell you anything about how your body is going to react to that thing that you blew up in the bomb calorimeter, right?
Correct. It's like saying my New Zealand dollar is the same thing as Japanese yen, and I should be able to expect to walk into a sushi store or any other kind of store in Japan and put my New Zealand dollar on the counter and say, I want $1 worth of goods, please. Because they'll go, no, that's not how it works. You need to go and exchange that for some Japanese yen. It's not going to, because
Yeah.
it's not the same thing. And to say, well, there is an equivalence mathematically between calories and kilojoules and any other form of energy, any other way of measuring it, sure. But that's the same thing as suggesting that you can spend all money in all stores anywhere in the world. It's contextual. It doesn't work that way.
Mm.
You're quite right,
Yeah.
David. It's a great little
Yeah.
add-on there that 100 calories is not 100 calories equivalent actual effective energy intake. It depends
Mm.
on what those calories are made up as.
That puts that one to rest. So, one of the other questions that I get asked a lot, and this may be specifically because of my channel,
Mm.
um, and I don't have a good answer for this, is how should I measure my macros? Because I basically don't measure anything. All I do is make sure I'm not eating carbohydrate.
Yeah,
So, what would you say to people who say, how do I measure my macros?
right. I would use you as an example, David. You're one of many, actually. And I would say, well, is what you're doing broke?
No.
No. Therefore, do you need to fix it? No. You don't need to track anything, count anything, measure anything, or weigh anything, frankly.
Mm.
I've looked at many documentaries about, cave art from many tens of thousands of years ago that still exists. I have never ever seen a cave painting of people with calculators, weighing scales, or chronometer. I've seen pictures of men with spears and bows and arrows and the prey they hunted. I've also never seen a picture of a salad, by the way, on a cave painting. That's not what they revered and went after. It was the meat. So yeah, this it's a form of mental illness, frankly. First of all, believing someone that tells you the only way to lose weight is to count something that won't change your weight anyway, and to vastly, grossly, hugely actually undereat in terms of mass, the thing that will affect your weight and your body composition. It's all mental illness. It's all ignorance, mental illness, foolishness. It's all contraindicated nonsense that really needs to stop yesterday. Here's what you do. You eat a diet which is appropriate for your species, Homo sapiens sapiens, human beings, one that's in line with your genetic gift, your biological systems, variously your organ systems, your metabolic system, all of that. One that is in line with your genetic gift and past, the way that we've done things. The thing that is selected for by way of Darwinian positive selection and stuff like that. What that does is it has an effect on your hormonal endocrine system in a positive way. It gets your inflammasome under control, largely. It sets your metabolic programming up in such a way as to achieve and maintain naturally your genetically predetermined ideal body mass, body composition. And it does that by giving you two different signals, which are things that are just feelings we get. They are things that our brain sends us messages that we interpret and give a label to, we give language to, so that we can describe what that is to another person. It is this: me hungry. Perhaps me eat nom 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 meat and animal fat. Nom 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 nom. Me full now. Ergo, me stop eating. That's it. That's your tracking. We've done that for, well, we've been human beings for 350,000 years. As I say, there's no paintings of calculators or chronometer or weighing scales or measuring things out. We didn't even know what a calorie was until several hundred years ago. And most of us still don't know what it is. Well, people that have listened to this chat now do. They understand a calorie is a measurement of heat energy transferred from one place to another by way of propagating photons of a certain wavelength. That's what it is, and nothing else. And no, it's not equivalent to anything else by way of effective energy intake anyway. So yeah, that's that one. So no tracking.
Nice. I mean, honestly, I'm happy to hear that, because when people have asked me that question, I felt like, oh, maybe I should be making sure I'm not eating as much protein as I am, or not eating as much
Mm.
fat as I am, or whatever. But at the end of the day, I've just kind of found the level that's right for me. And I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Okay,
it.
look, if you're eating too much protein,
Mm.
you will start to put body fat on and your energy will start to wane. And if
Mhm.
you're looking at such things, your blood glucose at rest will go up and your A1C will go up. So if you see those things, you're eating too much protein. Or if it's not that, you're eating too much mass altogether. It's unlikely to be too much mass altogether for most people, because actually, if I challenge you to eat too much mass of food, provided that there is no carbohydrate in that food, you will struggle to overeat. The satiety signaling is very, very strong on that. Your body does not want you to put in more protein and fat than it needs. What it does want you to do is put in more carbohydrate than you need. Because the biological design on that one is this. For the vast majority of the last 350,000 years, the Earth has been largely glaciated. The availability of plant materials of any kind was hugely limited. When we could get carbohydrates, they were a quick source of energy. They were kind of a bane, a bonus. And if we ate additional carbohydrates, then we could use at that immediate time, we could still transmute that relatively easily into fat and store it as fat. And so that's why the satiety signaling for carbohydrate is switched off. When could we get too much carbohydrate? Well, about 2 weeks a year when the berries were ripe. Right at the end of the autumn, just before the winter, when we're going to need that little bit of extra fat to keep us warm.
And
that's
so
why
everything was balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything was in balance then, right?
Yeah, because
So
the
you
other
were
thing you won't
getting
see a
fat at
cave
the right
painting
time.
of, you will not see a cave painting of a 7-Eleven or any other convenience store that you can go to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and buy carbohydrates in their tons if you want to. We could
Yeah.
find carbohydrates to speak of at all about 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, right when we were supposed to eat that to get fat.
The next one I hear a lot is if you aren't exercising, you can't lose weight.
Yep.
What's your feeling about that?
It's nonsense. Absolute rubbish. Look, exercise of the right kind at the right intensity with the right regularity and in the right volume, which is individual for a person's individual needs, age and stage, all of that. The benefits of that are huge. I'm not suggesting people should not exercise. Don't misquote me, people. I'm not saying that. What I am going to say to you, though, is this. You cannot outrun a bad diet. If your diet is wrong, you will need to exercise to keep your body weight under control. Your fatness is what I should say, under control. That is an indication that your diet is wrong. You do not need to exercise with planning and malice aforethought in order to maintain slimness, ideal body composition, muscularity, etc. You can improve your fitness and long-term prospects with the right kind of exercise, but it's not necessary. The thing that determines your body composition vastly more than anything else is how you feed yourself in terms of external inputs. What are you eating? What effect does that have on your endocrine system, your hormone system, the things that determine what your metabolism is doing, building up or breaking down, or maintaining, I suppose. Your inflammasome, because if you're inflamed, you will find it impossible to lose weight. The very things that the calories in, calories out folks also are completely ignoring. They're saying this mythical energy thing is the only thing that matters. It's that simple. It's first principles, it's thermodynamics, all of which, as we've already covered, are false. And they completely ignore the fact that the human body behaves metabolically according to instructions it receives from the systems of that body. You can't lose weight or fatness without exercising. False. You absolutely can.
It almost feels like that the kind of calories in, calories out, energy is what matters kind of people. It's like, this is, I mean, the idea, I guess, is from the food industry, because it's really simple. It's a simple equation, plus and minus. And so
Yeah.
the public's going to accept that, right? Because if it's
Yeah.
easy to remember, then everyone can digest that message. It's the same as all fat is bad, rather than saying these fats are bad.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
So,
blanket statement is easier.
yeah, blanket statements are easier and they're shorter sound bites, if you like. The thing about nice, short, punchy sound bites is that you can throw them out there, and the more times you say something that is false with a high level of confidence,
Mm.
the more likely it is that a person hearing that false message will start to believe it, will then start to defend that against all attackers of it and die on that hill, defending that position, despite the fact that it always was, in the first instance, false. So the people suggesting that all fat is bad are the people who grow plants and make foods out of those plants, as also underpinned and supported still further by the companies that make drugs that deal with the symptoms of eating plants, because most illness in human beings is down to eating plants, nothing else. There is so much money behind this, so much propaganda, spin doctory, fearmongery, false information. Fake news, it's fake news, I tell you. Fake news is what's going on. So yeah, all fats are bad. That's the industry supporting that. There's also the same people with the same financial interest that are telling us that all calories are the same, because that way you can have some carbohydrates in your diet, and that's not a bad thing, because so long as you stay under your calorie limit, if it fits your macros, if it fits your total calorie intake allowance, then you're okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's okay or not, David, except if you look at public health statistics and how they've changed, shall we say, over the last, let's say 80 years that people have been given this message, or 100 years now, really, actually. I wonder if obesity, the prevalence of obesity, has remained the same or decreased over the last 80 years.
Let me think.
Now, what about heart disease? Has that gone down in terms of its prevalence over the last 80 years? No. 100 years, I should say. What about type 2 diabetes and sequelae? No, once again. The only thing that's gone improved, if you like, over the last 100 years is the average lifespan. And that's largely because of medical technologies that are keeping people alive that we couldn't previously. The survival rate of a person's first heart attack is now vastly better than it was 100 years ago. Mostly, your first heart attack was the end 100 years ago. That was it. That's all she wrote. Now we can keep those people alive so that they can have a miserable, unhealthy life for another 20 years, 30 years before their fourth or fifth heart attack gets them. But let's not tell them to stop eating plants, the thing that caused it in the first place, by way of its effect on people's chronic systemic inflammation, which, by the way, is the absolute etiology and underpinning of cardiovascular disease, obesiogenesis, type 2 diabetes, all of that, immune dysfunctions, all of those things are hugely, vastly down to chronic systemic inflammation, which is underpinned mostly by eating poisonous plants. All of them, by the way.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
So I've got two more questions for you.
You bet.
And these could be maybe a little bit controversial.
No, I can't be involved in anything controversial, Dave.
So if you're eating all this meat, what about gout?
Right. Good. So a lot of people believe, according to their Wikipedia search or talking to their medical professional, again, I'll use those for medical professional, they believe that the cause of gout is an elevated level of uric acid, which is derived from the metabolism of meat. I need to correct or disabuse people of that notion. The cause of gout is not uric acid. the cause of gout is an inflammatory immune response and the dysfunction in a specific way of the liver, caused, again, at its root by chronic systemic inflammation. Most people who eat more than the suggested amount of meat are not on a carnivore diet. They are on a standard diet. They just happen to be eating more meat than they should. And as a function of that, those people have elevated uric acid in their blood, as you'd expect. And so the medical profession, and ergo Wikipedia search and Google whatever, will tell us, oh, well, therefore, obviously the cause of gout is elevated uric acid. Except if we look at populations of people who eat a lot of meat and no plants, the incidence of gout is basically none, which uncouples that so-called causality right there, doesn't it? It's once again an effect of the inflammation, which is caused by consuming a diet which is rich in both fats and carbohydrates. It's the Randall cycle. That's the issue here. That's the thing that's actually underpinning the inflammation, and it's the inflammation that underpins the gout. So no, uric acid does not cause gout. Inflammation does. It's like saying, if I did a study on the incidence of sunburn at Miami Beach on any given day over a number of days over a number of years to follow this thing really good, really decent period of time. And my other variable that I'll measure as being the thing that happened coincident with that is I'm going to measure the sale of ice creams at Miami Beach on each one of those days. What I am going to find is a strong, clear, linear and positive relationship between sunburn suffered by people at Miami Beach on any given day and the sale of ice cream. Ergo, the way to solve the sunburn problem is to outlaw ice cream sales at Miami Beach. Absolutely, fundamentally, utterly ridiculous and unscientific in any way. That is what we are doing by blaming gout on uric acid, or heart disease on cholesterol, or any one of the lipoproteins, or saturated fat, or any of those things. These are all associations which are incapable of informing on cause and effect.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the cholesterol thing as well is, as you say, it's the same. It's the same. There's this association. Exactly. So of course, cholesterol kills you.
Yeah,
high cholesterol kills you. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
False. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people that are on the carnivore diet are proof that it doesn't kill you. I mean, last I checked, my LDL was 382.
Okay.
So, and I feel healthier than I ever have in my life.
No, you're fooling yourself, David. You need to get on the statin immediately. The very thing that will actually increase your risk of type 2 diabetes, increase your risk of basically dissolving your own muscles, which is not a good thing, especially considering that your heart is itself a muscle, the very thing you're trying to protect, and won't be able to using a statin. It will also decrease your brain function by reducing your ability to myelinate. It will also reduce your ability to produce testosterone. It's a great thing as a statin. Absolutely, we should all get on one of those to protect ourselves from a conditional complaint that's not caused by cholesterol in the first place. Good idea.
Yeah.
For those that didn't pick it, I was being very sarcastic for the last few minutes.
Yeah. So the last question I had for you was going to be about cholesterol, but we've kind of touched on that. So I'll change that question.
Ask the question, and we'll give you some other nuance.
Okay. Oh, the cholesterol one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, basically it was, but your cholesterol is going to be too high.
Yep. Okay. So I'll give you another nuance, another way of looking at that, in addition to what I've already said about cholesterol, and it's this. The level of cholesterol in your blood at any given time is almost entirely controlled and under the influence of your genes. Those things you are born with, those things that you were born with because those things have survived 13,800 million years of evolution. The things that really, really know what they're doing
Mm.
Those are the things that control the level of your cholesterol. Under the influence of the environment in which you place those genes, they will optimize your likelihood of robust health, survival, all of that. That's what they do. So it's ridiculous to imagine, number one, that changing your diet will actually meaningfully have an effect on your cholesterol in the first place on any given day. Not directly anyway. Eating the correct diet will actually allow your cholesterol levels to normalize to
so
what they
your
should
genes to be working the way they were intended to work, or
yeah, because what you'll do when you change to a carnivorous diet is you'll stop poisoning yourself with plants, and then your body will start to work vastly more effectively in every respect. What you'll find probably for the first at least several years, depending on how long you've been living on the standard plant-eating diet, you will find that your cholesterol will be elevated, absolutely, after you've gone carnivore. And the reason for that is because your body is now able to have a sufficiency and indeed an overplus of cholesterol, which is useful in that because of all the inflammation that you've put your body under for years and years and years, your tissues are vastly damaged by that inflammation and they need repairing. Now, your tissues are made up of cells, obviously, and each one of those cells has a cell membrane, which is 50% cholesterol by weight and by volume, actually, near enough. And therefore, you need a huge amount of cholesterol to repair all that damage and replace all those cell membranes with new ones. And because cholesterol won't dissolve in blood because it's a lipid and water and lipids don't mix, you need a carrier to carry that cholesterol in the blood and deliver it to those cells. And that carrier is called LDL. So it's actually, I mean, here's the analogy on that one. If you look at footage from anywhere around the world of the latest horrific forest fire that's occurring somewhere, every time you will see shots of firemen scurrying around with hoses trying to put it out. So given that, every single time there's a forest fire, we find firefighters there. Clearly, they're the problem, the firefighters. So now we need to outlaw firefighters, do we?
They're setting all the fires and then putting them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? That's the craziest, stupidest thing I've ever heard. So, yeah, the first thing you need to do is stop listening to all these buffoons that think cholesterol is in any way causal in heart disease, or ApoB100, or ApoB48, or LP(a), or any of these subfractions. None of these things are causally related to heart disease. None of them. End of. I hope that's really clear. And so anyone that says otherwise does not understand the pathophysiology of cardiac disease, atherosclerosis.
I think, again, the problem is that the messaging has just been out there for so long, and the messaging is simple. LDL high, bad.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I'm not saying that. I'm imagining I'm, a pharmaceutical company rep or something. But that messaging, that simple messaging has been out there for so long, and simple messaging gets stuck in people's heads.
Yeah, like eat a balanced diet. Well, what a stupid idea.
And what does that mean anyway? Diet. It's balanced on my head. It means,
have meat in moderation, because that's bad. Okay. Have all these lovely healthy fruits and vegetables, which has never been proven to be anything of the sort. In fact, they're contraindicated. They're poisonous. They'll shorten your lifespan and your health span, actually. Avoid fat, especially saturated animal fat. So say the Wheat Growers Association, who outright own the ADA and who also pay for all the research studies that tell us that fat is bad. The whole thing is a have from the ground up. Absolutely. There's no science behind any of that stuff whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You've you've really cleared a lot of these questions up for me, and of course for anyone that's watching this. Hopefully this arms people a lot more to counter those objections or questions that we get from people when they find out we're on a keto or carnivore diet.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I hope it's helpful. What I would suggest to people is choose your battles.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, don't spend all your life's energy on trying to change the mind of a buffoon, frankly. But if you're in that position where you are in that discussion and you do need some ammunition, some basic unassailable facts, I hope I've given them to you today. And perhaps what you need to do is to watch this video that David has organized and put together here 100 billion times and take notes and learn it verbatim.
Yeah. But for people, if people are not subscribed to your channel already, they should be. But if they haven't found your channel yet, where can they find you?
Right. If you go to the tubes of Ubes, and you put in at Bart -Kay, you've found me.
Awesome.
And underneath every one of the videos on that channel, you will find a list of 4 or 5 other YouTube's channels and their links that you can click directly in the show notes under those videos. And you could subscribe to all of them. That'd be great. And then you can start sharing those things selectively, because some of my stuff is a little bit sweary from time to time, but only when it's necessary. Most of my stuff is not so sweary these days, though, so you can probably share most of it pretty safely and help me to get my message out there, because YouTube is not helping me get my message out there.
Yeah.
I don't espouse a proved narrative, unfortunately, and as such, I'm a very, very bad man and need to be held down and suppressed for as long as possible. So rise up, my good fellow meat militia soldiers, fight against the man or the woman. Let's not assume the gender of the bad person. There might be an attack helicopter.
Yeah, and I'll link to your channel and also to Pim's channel below for everyone so there's easy access to it. Thank you so much for today, Bart. I really appreciate you coming on.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Guys, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to click like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. Click the join button under this video or the first link in the description. Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.